I'd like to welcome Carla here on behalf of the Wheatland Crisis Society. I said that in the right order? Yep. Okay. Yeah, please turn the mic on. There's a little bar there, red light, perfect. Okay. For your information, we record the meetings and put them on the website. Okay.
So I would just like to say, everyone can hear me first? Yeah. So good afternoon, Your Worship and council members. I'd like to thank you all for allowing us to come out here and speak to you today. My name is Carly Cole. I'm the, if I stand here, can you still hear me? Yeah? Okay. I'm the public educator with the Wheatland Crisis Society. I've been in this role for about 2 years. And before I get into anything, I'd like to tell you all that I care very deeply about what I do, and I care very deeply about the agency that I work for. And I hope that that comes across today. And the reason why I say this is because I really invite and I encourage you to ask any question that comes up for you at any point in this presentation. Please feel free to just put up a hand or just interrupt me, ask a question. If I'm not able to answer it, our CEO, Ms. Wanda McGuinness, who is right here, as well as our board chairperson, Tracy Polowich, I'm sure will be happy to answer any questions that I'm unable to. So in moving forward, I want to start things off with our mandate, our vision, our mission, and our goals. I'm not going to read all of this out for you, and this will be made available to you via email, so you can read these if you're so interested. But what we're primarily known as is a family abuse shelter. The language that I use here is very important. I use the word family abuse. I don't use the word domestic violence. And I use the words family abuse shelter, not women's shelter. And I would invite anyone here that has any guesses as to why we use this language. Pardon? Correct, yes. So that's one of the big things about our shelter. We've always accepted men. We always have, we always will. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on that later in this presentation. But we do accept men that are victims of abuse as well as their children. Another reason why is we use the term family abuse, not domestic violence, is because it's not always domestic. This can look like an adult's child and their parent. This can look like a parent and their adult child. This could look like siblings that may be living together. This can also look like even roommates. So abuse kind of, it can mean a lot of things. It doesn't just mean domestic violence. The other thing that I'll speak to is the word violence, which is a form of abuse, yes? Not the only a form of abuse, though. So we also cover things like verbal, emotional, psychological, financial, elder, sexual, cultural, as well as honor-based. These are all different forms of abuse, and these are all individuals that will come to us with various forms of abuse. So again, family abuse shelter, not women's shelter, not domestic violence shelter, because what we do might be a little bit different from what other shelters are doing. So back to the men. How are we different? We're different in that we recognize abuse doesn't discriminate. It affects people across all classes, races, genders, and cultures. And our shelter is one of very, very, very few in this country, 3 or 4, I believe, I don't have an exact number, that take men. It's a very underserved population, and unfortunately, a lot of men fleeing abuse are forced to utilize homeless shelters, which is not the place for someone that is escaping abuse, and we do recognize that. One other thing that I will touch on is that we're very, very proud to be a resource for the LGBTQ+, as well as the trans community. So for instance, if we have an individual that is transitioning from female to male, there is no resource for them. We are it. So just a few highlights of why we're different. I'm not going to go into detail with you today about every single one of these programs up here. These are just, this is every single thing that we do. What I will tell you is my card has been left for every single one of you. If you are ever interested in having me come to speak at any event, as small as 2 people up to 200 people, about our programs and what it looks like to come into our shelter and our day-to-day activities, how things work, how to help people access, please, please contact me. This is my job. Like I said, I care very much. I've lived in this community my entire life. I'm born and raised in Strathmore and Wheatland County. I didn't know about several of these programs until I came to work for this organization. And I feel that many community members don't as well. So it's my job to get out there and to let people know. And if there's ever someone in your life or in someone you know's life that might benefit from our services, I want every single person in this community to know how to access and how to handle that. That's my job. So please feel free to come invite me to anything you got. I'm happy. I have a whole presentation on it. What I do want to outline is that we are much more than just a shelter. So we have several programs outside of our shelter. Sorry, did you have a question? Yeah.
Sorry. But where I come from, out in the far northeast corner of the municipality, the majority of the people out there end up in the Drumheller area. And there's nothing in your brochures that would give them the idea that there's something in that area that they could also access.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I know if they phoned your office and said where they were, you'd probably tell them, but there should be something in here said that you're associated with, or you work with the Drumheller,
Okay.
the same system in Drumheller, or even in the Bazzano area, because I know there's some in that far corner
Absolutely.
too.
Thank you so much for that. I sincerely appreciate that. We can certainly look into that. I do know, I do attend myself and other staff attend the Drumheller as well as the Three Hills Interagency. So we are trying to make a conscious effort to let those communities know that we certainly do offer services. I know our outreach team does have satellite space that they use in Three Hills and Drumheller, but you are correct. We could probably maybe do a little more even on our website or something. So it's certainly a consideration
Just
I'm
an
sure we can
acknowledgement
make.
that there's other areas.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be much, but if I pick this up and I'm from out there, I give it to somebody out there.
guess.
Well, it's no good for me because I go to the drum, so
Community
who do I
service.
get a hold of?
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So back to programs. That's about it. So we'll move on to the next slide. And again, thank you for your comment. We'll certainly recognize the communities that we serve maybe a little more. So oftentimes people ask us, who can come to shelter? Who does our shelter take? You'll see on this inverted pyramid here, our primary funded mandate would be parents or caregivers and their children that are affected by family abuse. Just underneath of that, that's going to be single individuals affected by family abuse, parents or caregivers, and children in crisis, single individuals in crisis. What is a crisis? A crisis can look like homelessness or couch surfing. It can look like the destruction of a dwelling, overcrowding of the home, unsafe or unsanitary conditions. Again, something that a lot of people I don't think realize, and again, I didn't realize until I came to work for this organization, is that homelessness is something that we do. So if there's a community member, specifically local people, if we have the space, we're going to help them. It's not that we want to turn people away in any way, shape, or form. Just this is kind of the pyramid. So if we're not full and someone is struggling, we can certainly help them in a situation like that. So while we're on the topic of homelessness, I want to briefly touch on a few of the shelter options in Strathmore. So the Strathmore Overnight Shelter, I'd like to preface what I'm going to say by saying that this organization, the Strathmore Overnight Shelter, the homeless shelter, absolutely 100% has our full support, and we're very, very excited for something like this to open up in our community. As far as I know, they haven't been able to open yet due to some training issues with staff, and I know they are still working on that, but I know maybe a little less or just as much as everyone else on that. There has been a lot of confusion in the community and in the county about what we do versus what they do. We've also had a little bit of confusion in regards to donations, as well as kind of people just showing up to our shelter assuming it might be a homeless shelter. So just for the sake of clarification, I wanted to touch briefly on kind of the difference between an abuse shelter and a homeless shelter, specifically ours and theirs. All of the details of their shelter I have received either from the media or from their website. So I don't have a lot, but I'm going off of what we do know for sure. So our shelter, family shelter, children, safety planning is the most important component of the work that we do. With a homeless shelter, it's going to be only adults, only single adults that are going to be the candidates for that type of shelter. We are a registered charity with the CRA. You can find all of our financials and everything on their website. We can issue tax receipts for everything that we do. Currently, they are privately funded, and I was not able to find them as a registered charity at this time. Not to say that they aren't moving forward or they aren't under the Harvest Healing Church umbrella. I'm not sure of these things, but just a few different things. So our receipts, it may be a totally different process than what they're offering for donations. Our clients are encouraged to remain in shelter during the day. We have very intensive day programming. So our crisis workers work with individuals each day, safety planning, case planning, employment, next steps, things like that. People are encouraged to stay with us. Whereas within a homeless shelter, people must exit during the day. We offer a 3-week stay. That is our funded mandate. They are able to offer a 5-day stay, so much shorter. Our staff as well are heavily trained in trauma-informed practice and domestic violence. One thing we do a lot of at the Wheatland Crisis Society is training. We're always trying to keep on top and be as trauma-informed and aware as we possibly can. The focus within the overnight shelter is going to be on more so the necessities of life, a shower, a hot meal, things like that. We do offer comprehensive children's programming, and we also have a trauma-informed substance policy in place. The overnight shelter, like I had mentioned, they're currently not accepting clients until staff have completed some training. Other typical attributes of a homeless shelter, not per se to this one, but of most homeless shelters I've ever toured or been involved with, is that safety planning, yes, it does exist. It's part of what they do. But harm reduction is kind of their main model. So just keeping people out of harm's way no matter what they're doing, whereas sobriety is not a barrier to service as well. So just a few differences between us, just to clarify. And if you need more clarification, please feel free to ask, not a problem. So every single person here has been provided with our report to the community. There's a lot of numbers in this if you've had a chance to look at it. There's one that sticks out, and this would be that 157 adults and 124 children were turned away last year because we didn't have space for them. It's a big number, and I know that. I also feel that this number needs some explanation. So yep, big number, 157 adults, 124 children in a year. I can tell you that we didn't have the space to take them, but what we did do was we made sure that they had a safe place to go. Just because we don't have the space doesn't mean that we're not still going to work diligently to make sure that they are safe. Our crisis workers will often ask someone when they're calling us up, if we don't have the space, if we can call on their behalf and advocate at other shelters for them. Not only does this save someone in crisis time, but it also it aids them in not having to retell that traumatic and that triggering story 5 more times to 5 different strangers to try and find a safe place for them and their kids. So we'll often do that on behalf of them. I just want to make it very clear, we will never turn someone away until they have a safe place to go. And we work very, very, very hard and long at finding them safe places to go. So we just want to make that really clear and just kind of clarify that number for anyone who is a little astounded by it, because I know I was. So we're going to round out this presentation and talk about second stage a little bit. So what is second stage? As it says up here, it's apartments in a secure building that houses families who are participating in a second stage housing strategy. The units are heavily subsidized typically, and families are supported with ongoing counseling, childcare, life skills, employment skills. So the goal of this is to allow families time to use their new skills that they've gained in a shelter stay with us in a safe and a supported environment that improves the chance of long-term success. So our shelter would be classified as first stage. When people are exiting, they might be moving along to second stage. It's much more independent, it's less structured than the work that we do, and residents do pay rent. So a little further with this, why do we need it? It costs $9,371.88 for a mom and 2 children to stay in our shelter for 3 weeks. And people are staying longer. They don't have anywhere else to go because we don't have enough affordable options. And the affordable options we do have aren't affordable enough. We're not ever going to kick someone out on the street. We're going to keep them safe. We're going to keep them sheltered. But they are staying longer. If we had a second stage in this community for the parents and their kids to transition into, We feel it would give them the opportunity to thrive, and it would also greatly lower the risk of them returning to their partner for lack of other options. A lot of times people don't have other options, and they might return just because they have nowhere else to go. We feel it's a really important thing to have in our community. It would also save us a lot of operational dollars because people would only be staying those 3 weeks, not 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it may look like. So that is that. And then our next steps with our second stage. This is something that we are planning on doing in this community. We have taken some steps forward with this. We did a survey in about the past year and a bit within our shelter. When people are exiting our shelter, we've asked that question. If there was a second stage, would you be interested in accessing it in this community of Strathmore? 61% of people said yes, 23 were unsure or unanswered, and 17% said no. So we know that the need is there, and it is something we're moving forward in doing. And I might let Wanda speak a little bit more to the ways that we're moving forward with this, if that's okay or no. A little bit of our plan, yeah. If that's okay. I just wasn't sure with the operational dollars. You speak a little better to it than I.
Okay. So if anybody has any specific questions around the second stage, I'd be happy to answer them. We think that we can come up with a really innovative plan around incorporating the second stage shelter model into our current operational dollars that we already receive in the funding from the provincial government. So we're looking at everything from public-private partnerships to creating a facility that incorporates both the emergency first stage shelter and the second stage shelter, where staff are accessible to both groups. So we're really excited about this. We'd be the first model in Alberta to do something like this. And we believe that the numbers tell us our families that we're working with do need more from us. And so we want to respond, and we want to respond in a way that's fiscally responsible. And we think extending stays at, $9,000 for 21 days, that's 6 months in subsidized rent. And so I think we can do better. And we're really excited, and we want to encourage you to get excited with us. We want to make sure that we're accessible to you if you have other questions, and if you have ideas, because you're all in the positions you're in because you're idea people. And so, we're here to share with you what we're doing, but we also are here to absorb some of what you have to offer us. So if anyone has any questions.
Thank you sorry, it's me. Thank you so much. Wanda speaks to that a lot better than I, so that's just why I invited her up. But on that note, I would like to thank everyone again for allowing us the time at your meeting. I know your time is valuable. It was my absolute pleasure to come out here and speak with you all today. And it's always my absolute pleasure to answer any questions that you might have, whether it's now or in the future. You can always reach out. You have my contact details. So I will open the floor to questions if you have any. And otherwise, thank you very, very, very much for having us out.
I'll start over. Thanks, Carla. Do anyone have any questions?
Okay, perfect. Well,
Donna does?
When you talk about private, your second stage, your private collaborate, yeah, what does that look like? Like, is that someone giving up their home, or someone who has I don't know what it looks like.
So one of the visions we have is, I'm going to give you this kind of a really specific vision, is we think about incorporating some kind of a restaurant, let's say, on a lower floor of a facility, where the restaurant kitchen would serve to feed families that are in shelter. It would also serve to provide job employment skills to the women who maybe don't have any. And we'd look for someone who's an entrepreneur in the community who's interested in opening a restaurant to be part of that partnership. So it could really benefit everybody and have a real kind of multi-faceted purpose. So that's one of the ideas that we've talked about. I'll throw out another one that some people have talked about as a consignment store. I know in Strathmore right now we have a lot of them. But same thing is something that can have a purpose for the people who are in the shelter, that is a need in the community. And we'd really want to invite the community into those discussions about what does this community need, what would be valuable, and what are some really translatable employment skills that we can give our people who are staying with us that make sense and make them employable within the community that they're living in. Because that's the goal, that they become independent and self-sufficient. And so how do we help them along through that process? Yeah, the other piece to that would be to subsidize some of the gaps in funding that there may be as well.
So where do you rely on funding? Where do you get the bulk of your funding? Or?
Right now, we get the bulk of our funding through Alberta Human Services. And so we get a per diem for the number of beds that we have. So we're a 25-bed shelter, and it carries with it $148 per diem. So we get approximately almost $1.4 million in core funding through the Alberta government. We fundraise around $100,000 a year to supplement programming that the government does not pay for. And we also receive about $140,000 from Children's Services to support the children's programming. It's one of the things we're noticing is that children are coming in, they came in originally as children with their parents, and now they're coming in as adults with their own children. So we know we're missing something along the way. So we're continually putting extra focus on how do we support the children and change what they know from how they've grown up.
Is there any low income funding, or is there anything like that? Subsidized housing or anything like that?
No, so we work with Wheatland Housing in the same way that, you know, any other person who's referring low-income families, but we don't have any kind of unique partnership.
Just refer back and forth then?
That's right. And what we're finding is that the money that many of our families are, you know, able to access doesn't cover even the subsidized amounts.
Yeah.
When you're talking children and some of those ones where they're outside where you say you don't accept children, what are you looking at as an age? Is that 18 and under, or is it 14 and under? What's not?
We don't have any, this makes us unique as well. We don't have any age limits on children. We would consider anybody who's dependent as someone who's a child. So I'll give you an example. If a dad and 3 teenage boys tried to access shelter in Calgary, they wouldn't find a space anywhere. If a mom and 3 teenage boys tried to access shelter in Calgary, she may not find anywhere either that would accept her teenage boys. We accept them. We recognize that moms or dads are not leaving somewhere that's unsafe and leaving their children behind. They're just not doing it. So if you call and we have beds for you, we're helping you. And if you are a family that is going to be difficult to house in many of the other areas, we're going to move our house around and we're going to accommodate you. So you become a high priority client for us.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks again. Yeah. Motion accept for information.
I'll move that we accept their presentation.
Information. Okay, we'll see you. Thanks. Amber's moved to accept it as information. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda, I believe.
Checks to sign?
Yes, checks to sign. I got papers here. No, Joanne isn't here.